Hope awoke to the lavender-tinged dawn over Beverly Hills with a restless throb in her chest, the kind that warned her the foundation of everything she trusted was already splintering beneath the day's first light. And before the sun fully cleared the horizon, word reached her that Ridge had boarded a pre-dawn jet bound for Rome with Taylor, that the vows Brooke believed would eventually come back to her were instead being hurried across the Atlantic like contraband love letters, leaving Brooke alone in a house still scented with yesterday's roses and wrecked hopes. Brooke's devastation was not a single shattering blow, but a succession of merciless jolts. First the text from Ridge explaining nothing, then the voicemail from Eric admitting he could no longer fight his son's promise to Taylor. And finally the image circulated in pitiless group chats of Ridge and Taylor stepping onto the runway, his hand covering hers the way it once shielded Brooke from every storm. Brooke staggered, pouring coffee she did not taste, replaying a torrent of memories that refused to dull the fresh slash of betrayal, and somewhere in the ache she vowed to intercept Ridge before the ceremony, swearing under her breath that love, no matter how bruised, still deserved one last defense. Yet as she booked the next flight to Fiumicino, dread whispered that even if she arrived in time she might discover a ring already sealed around Ridge's finger and a promise to Taylor too newly spoken to be undone. Across town Luna studied her reflection with predatory calm. Will's indecision had become the fulcrum of her strategy, and with Sheila's hushed encouragement she rehearsed the smile that would look simultaneously wounded and inviting when Will finally surrendered to the hunger he tried to ignore. Electra had drawn a fault line by insisting they move slowly, clinging to the notion that intimacy should follow trust, not eclipse it. Luna intended to widen that fault until Electra toppled into it, and Will, lonely and impulsive, reached for the consolation Luna offered. Sheila, ever the architect of chaos, had already arranged coincidences: a shared ride to the studio, a forgotten jacket in Will's dressing room, each nudge tightening Luna's hold. Tonight, Luna promised herself, Will's resistance would fracture, because forbidden desire was a glass wall. Beautiful, transparent, and ultimately breakable by the gentlest persistent pressure. At Forrester Creations, Hope tried to steady her voice, while Liam urged her to reconsider the distance she had placed between herself and Carter, insisting Carter's steadiness could anchor her through the Richter scale aftershocks of Ridge's wedding. Hope listened, surprised by the clarity with which Liam, her former husband and persistent friend, mapped the anguish in her eyes and offered solutions that did not involve himself. She wanted to dismiss the advice, to brand it meddling born of old affection, yet she could not ignore the warmth that flooded her at the thought of Carter's quiet strength. She had almost reached for her phone when Katie arrived, cheeks flushed with urgency, to reveal Daphne's covert mission. Documents forged, conversations staged, all to wedge Hope away from Carter so Steffi could retain a strategic grip on company alliances. The revelation detonated inside Hope like a flare, illuminating weeks of uneasy coincidences, missed messages, misunderstood invitations, subtle scratches on trust that now looked like deliberate sabotage. Fury welded with resolve. She would confront Daphne, but first she needed Carter's truth at her side, because love born under siege either calcified or combusted, and she intended theirs to emerge tempered and alive. Meanwhile, Liam sat beneath the sterile glow of a neurologist's office, nursing the secret of an inoperable brain tumor, each prognosis a chorus of ticking clocks only he could hear. He had sworn Steffi and Finn to silence, believing pity would poison the remaining time he could still call normal, yet secrecy grew heavier by the hour, pressing lines into his smile and shadows under his eyes. Bill sensed tremors in his son's composure and began threading together late-night voicemails and missed meetings, but Liam deflected with half-truths, rehearsing courage while privately counting headaches like falling petals. Hope's intuition, sharpened by years of deciphering Liam's moods, tugged at her whenever he turned away too quickly or rubbed the base of his skull, and although she had told herself she would not chase ghosts, the urge to pry open whatever darkness he had gnawed at her resolve. On the outskirts of Rome, Ridge and Taylor stood inside a stone chapel perfumed with centuries of candle wax, the hush broken only by their breathing. Ridge recited vows hastily translated into Italian, voice trembling at lines that should have felt triumphant, but instead echoed like foreign prophecy, and Taylor, radiant yet wary, wondered whether speed could outrun doubt. They exchanged rings moments before Brooke's flight touched down, moments before Brooke sprinted through customs clutching nothing but determination, only to feel the world tilt when a local blogger's post confirmed the ceremony had concluded. She drove through the winding city streets toward the chapel anyway, refusing to accept finality until she saw it with her own eyes, each turn a battle between hope and the inevitability Ridge had already sealed. Back in Los Angeles, Carter opened his office door to find Hope waiting, her expression a tempest. She told him about Daphne, about the fabricated emails and contrived misunderstandings, her words pouring out in a torrent that scalded them both, and Carter, stunned yet strangely relieved, realized the cold distance he had felt was not his failure to reach her, but someone else's calculated barrier. They decided in that breath to confront Daphne together, to reclaim the narrative of their hearts by stripping manipulation of its hiding place, and as they left the building side by side, a silent vow pulsed between them whatever storm awaited. They would stand in its center hand in hand. Daphne, however, had already sensed the unraveling of her scheme. She booked a night flight to Paris, intent on escaping before consequences closed in, but not before one final attempt to poison the well. A message to Steffi hinting that Hope's loyalty was fickle, that Carter leveraged romance for corporate gain. The note failed to land. Its desperation betrayed itself, and Steffi, weary of collateral damage, let the accusation die unread. By dawn, Daphne would be airborne, her seat a cage of regret, as the city she once played like a chessboard receded under cloud. At Spencer Publications, Bill stared at the medical pamphlet he had found folded in Liam's jacket pocket. Symptoms, prognosis, statistics bleak enough to hollow any father's chest, and decided that no vow of silence would stand between him and the truth. He cornered Liam that evening, demanding an explanation, but Liam, voice made brittle by fear, confessed only fragments before the weight of unspoken finality cracked him open. Bill listened, eyes shining with a fury born of love, and promised his son that no doctor's verdict was absolute, that they would ransack every corner of medicine until possibility surrendered. Yet afterward, alone, Liam felt the paradox of relief and terror. Truth was no longer his solitary burden, but spoken aloud it tasted irreversible. Across town, Electra, sensing Will's restlessness, confronted him with her boundaries, and though he agreed, lips trembling with desire he could not disguise, the fissure widened. That night Luna appeared at Will's door with a bottle of wine and a story about dreams deferred, and when he hesitated she brushed his knuckles with a touch electric enough to ignite the air. The door closed behind them, the first barrier fell, and somewhere Sheila smiled at the echo of triumph. In Rome, Brooke reached the chapel steps lit by dying candlelight. Inside she saw wedding petals scattered across the aisle like bruised memories, and at the altar a pastor extinguishing the last wick. She knelt, fingertips skimming the cool marble where Ridge and Taylor had pledged forever, tears finally breaching the dam of pride. Yet as grief coursed through her another current rose, unyielding resolve. She whispered that Italy was not the end, that vows made in haste could be broken in revelation, and she would gather every shard of faith to prove it. She boarded the next plane home carrying sorrow like a sword, her heart raw yet adamant. The following morning brought collisions. Carter and Hope confronted Daphne moments before her departure. Words flared, accusations ricocheted, but when Daphne realized every corridor of deceit had been illuminated, she surrendered with a sigh that sounded almost grateful and walked away without glancing back. Hope turned to Carter, and for the first time since confusion clouded them, they kissed without hesitation, the taste of reclaimed trust binding them invisibly. Luna, slipping from Will's apartment at dawn, believed victory secure. Unaware Electra had awakened minutes earlier to find an envelope beneath the door, a single photograph of Luna and Sheila in conspiratorial embrace, unsigned but unmistakable. Electra's heart hammered with betrayal, and she fled toward Will's studio, uncertainty warring with rage. Liam, sitting with Bill in the muted hush of a specialist's office, learned experimental therapy might lengthen the horizon he thought was shrinking, yet Hope's price was brutal. Invasive procedures, relentless side effects, no guarantee. He accepted nonetheless, because unknown agony was still life, and he was not ready to bow to darkness. Hope arrived at the hospital moments later, intuition finally given name, and when Liam saw her, his fragile composure fractured. He told her everything, and in her embrace he felt the first genuine quiet since diagnosis, a silence woven from acceptance rather than denial. Brooke's return ignited Forrester corridors with shock. She walked straight to Eric, voice steadied by heartbreak, and declared she would reclaim Ridge no matter the distance, that love tested by continents could still prevail. Eric, torn between loyalty to his son and the ache in Brooke's eyes, offered counsel laced with caution, but Brooke had already charted her course. At the same hour, Ridge and Taylor landed in Los Angeles to begin their new life, only to feel the city's heartbeat change, as though the story they had tried to conclude was instead roaring anew. And somewhere in that restless pulse, Electra stepped onto the studio set, photograph clenched in her fist, Luna's name a vow on her lips, while Hope threaded her fingers through Liam's as nurses prepped his first treatment. And Carter drafted plans to shield their relationship from the fallout still to come, and Brooke locked eyes with Ridge across a crowded lobby, the distance between them suddenly alive with every memory they had ever forged. The bold and the beautiful world spun forward, secrets exposed, alliances redrawn, love tested by betrayal, yet in every shattered expectation there stirred the stubborn, glimmering promise that tomorrow's dawn, however storm-struck, could still rewrite the fate that night believed it had sealed.